Hi, everyone. It's great to have you all. Thanks for logging on to our back to school kickoff today. I'm very excited to have you. I will be doing a little visual presentation, and if you are just on your phone, I still will be speaking all the information, and we will make that available to you after as well, so you don't miss anything. All right, we can get started in just a minute here. Just a reminder, if you want to turn your camera on, you're welcome to, but just ask that you stay on mute during the presentations. We'll have a little time for some questions at the end if you have any. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. All right. So again, welcome everyone to our back to school kickoff. It's 2021. I don't know how we got here, but we made it. It's the new year. And hopefully we can, kick butt this year and make some things happen. So first, I just wanted to introduce myself since this is my first time hosting a back to school call in my role. My name is Maeve Sheridan. I'm the new Assistant Director of Campus Organizing here at It's On Us. I was a campus organizer and then a regional advisor in college as well. So I've been where you are now, and I'm very excited to continue to support you in this work. First of all, just wanted to reiterate our mission, which is to build the movement to combat campus sexual assault by engaging all students, including young men, and activating the largest student organizing program of its kind in grassroots awareness and prevention education programs. We're still building this movement, and the way that we're doing that is through our virtual programming initiatives and giving you the tools and knowledge that you need so that when you are back on campus in person, you're able to continue to do this work. So where were we before the pandemic? I know it's hard to even imagine that a time before this pandemic existed, but it did. We were having to play defense all the time, but we were united and we were fighting for a more just system together. Work continued even as the administration pushed back and students organized on campuses. When the pandemic hit, we basically had to switch everything to virtual very quickly. We canceled our tour in person with Tinder, but our students rallied and we rallied as well. We had to. Having a virtual option for our summit actually ended up making it easier for students to participate. We had almost 6,000 students during our 3-week summit series versus about 120 in person the year before, which is awesome. In the end, no one else is doing the volume of virtual programming that we are in the field right now, and we want to continue that streak and continue to make things accessible for you all. Post-Trump. I am so relieved to have this on this slide. When I was typing this up, when I was writing my notes, I was like, wow, it is so beautiful to be talking about how this is in the past. So Trump is gone, but the past 4 years were not a complete bust. Students have done a lot of work, and it was harder than before, but we were still advocating, and it gave us an opportunity to come together as a movement and assess what's really needed. There's been a shift in this movement, which is great. We're better at acknowledging the existence of women of color and disabled folks in the space. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're able to focus a little bit more on bringing those communities into the forefront. During those 4 years, several notable things happened in this field. First of all, we had Me Too, an incredible movement. Activist Tarana Burke started the Me Too campaign more than 10 years ago. And her goal is to spread a message for survivors that you're heard and you're understood. Actress Alyssa Milano helped kick off the current phase of the movement just a few years ago to give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. And several things actually changed because of this movement. We can attribute it to the Me Too movement and the subsequent, public uproar that came after that. So one of the systemic problems that was exposed by the coverage of Harvey Weinstein, for example, and other powerful men, was the use of non-disclosure agreements. As the Me Too movement gained attention, several states ended up passing laws prohibiting the use of non-disclosure agreements in sexual misconduct cases. In September of 2018, California banned the agreements in cases involving sexual assault, harassment, or sex discrimination. New York and New Jersey enacted similar laws. The federal Be Heard Act, introduced last year by Senator Patty Murray, Representative Catherine Clark, and Representative Ayanna Pressley, and others, also bans some of those non-disclosure agreements. Also, Time's Up, a group of women in Hollywood working to fight harassment, started their legal defense fund, aiming at helping survivors of sexual misconduct, especially in low-wage industries, get legal representation. Since the fund started in January 2018, it raised over $24 million and connected about 4,000 people with attorneys to pursue possible legal action. And since Me Too entered its most public phase, allegations against legislators on both sides of the aisle drew attention to the issue of sexual misconduct by members of Congress as well. Last year, Congress passed legislation addressing a number of issues advocates has raised with its process for congressional employees to report harassment or assault, eliminating a mandatory 3-month waiting period for people reporting misconduct, during which the survivor would have to go through counseling and mediation before even filing a lawsuit. We also had the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. In 2018, hundreds of people, most of them women, many students, traveled to DC from around the country to oppose the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. They spoke about their fears of losing health insurance, access to safe and legal abortion, and safeguards that protected voters' rights. More than anything else, though, they spoke about having survived sexual violence and expressed their anger that a credible allegation against the nominee had been disbelieved, as so many of their own stories had. Although Kavanaugh's nomination was accepted, Christine Blasey Ford's testimony changed the lives of millions, including mine. It was beautiful to see her hold her ground, and I know I and many other survivors in the world felt her pain. We also had our Title IX ruling changes. On May 6th in 2020, the Department of Education released a set of regulations on how schools and universities in particular manage sexual misconduct. This interpretation of Title IX not only placed new barriers in the way of survivors coming forward, but for most victims, eliminated the possibility altogether. They were not oversights. The Trump administration was perfectly clear about the intended effect of the new rule to reduce investigations. In the included financial analysis of that rule, it estimated that the rate of investigations would drop so sharply that it would collectively save universities $189 million per year. The goal of that rule was to silence survivors to benefit perpetrators of sexual violence in the universities they attend. We debuted our One Shitty Gift, a campaign that that pushed for people to respond to Betsy DeVos's Title IX rules. We fought, we protested, we commented. The changes went into effect last year, but luckily we are in a new world and the Biden administration plans to change that. And along that line, the future, where are we going? We now have a way more supportive administration, which will make it easier for us to get things done. We want to help this administration modernize the existing systems. Our goal is to work closely with the Biden administration to undo the Title IX rule to support survivors. We want to take into serious account in the forefront the students that are most marginalized and have the most difficulty accessing resources. We also plan to partner with the Biden administration to ensure our movement continues to grow. And we continue to make progress in changing the culture that has allowed campus sexual assault to harm so many individuals and communities for years. We want to continue to call young men into the movement as allies and survivors. So 2020 was really hard. I think we can all collectively agree that it was a very hard year. A lot of terrible things happened, a lot of stress. We're out of it, but there were definitely some silver linings. That doesn't mean good things didn't happen. So I thought it would be fun to talk about a few. So first of all, we debuted our Summit Series last summer, and we had 5,267 participants over the 3-week course, which was so awesome. We were really happy to have students the opportunity to access our information and our resources from all over the country. A record number of Americans also turned out to vote in our national election, many by mail-in voting. The 2020 election saw the most voter participation in 120 years. And this election led to historic wins for LGBTQ+ people and women of color as well. At least 50 women of color, including 46 Democrats, will serve in the 117th Congress. Marie Turner, a 27-year-old Muslim who identifies as Black and non-binary, was elected to the Oklahoma State Legislature. Sarah McBride, a 30-year-old LGBTQ activist, became the nation's first openly trans senator and the highest-ranking openly trans lawmaker in the country after winning her race. Black women led the nation, more than 9 in 10 voting for Democratic candidate Joe Biden in an election that was far closer than it should have been. And we elected America's first female vice president, first Black vice president, and first Asian American vice president, Senator Kamala Harris. Black Lives Matter also became the biggest mass movement in history. People around the world rose up to protest police violence and racial injustice, and continue to do so. The Supreme Court ruled that no one can be fired for being gay or transgender. And we got rid of Betsy DeVos. What a beautiful, beautiful thing to have. I just wanted to include one of my favorite memes about getting rid of Betsy DeVos for everyone to see. All right, so now into some more logistics. I wanted to talk about our 2021 event calendar. January 11th to the 22nd, we just had our Engaging Men series, which was so fun. We did so well that we plan to extend this into the spring, so please stay tuned for that. Sylvia will also be discussing something we need your help on. In March, we'll be having Film Fridays with NBRAG on campus. If any students want to share a film or a play that they created, please send them to Sylvia. We will link her contact information in the chat and in the follow-up email. March 8th is International Women's Day, an awesome day for us all. Keep an eye out for some social media from us and from the administration as well, I'm sure. April, of course, is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and April 5th to the 9th, we'll be doing our Spring Week of Action. Normally, we'd encourage you to create your own events, which we still, of course, will, but we also are aware that virtual programming is a big ask and can be hard. So we plan to do several events over the course of that week that you can attend as well. And our tentative plan is also to virtually do the summit next summer again. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sylvia, our Director of Educational Programming and Training at It's On Us. She's an organizer with In My Words, a campaign to reimagine justice and healing for survivors of sexual harm. She is a survivor activist and an expert in national campus sexual assault programs. Sylvia has worked with multiple federal, state, private, and nonprofit groups to improve their response to violent crimes and was a member of the White House Task Force to protect students from sexual assault under the Obama administration. Her work is rooted in improving access to sexual assault response and prevention services for students and ensure that they are relevant and effective. With that, I'll turn it over to her to talk a little bit more about our program this year.
Hi, everyone. Wow, thank you so much, Maeve. As Maeve said, I'm the Director of Educational Programs and Training here at It's On Us. And I just wanted to hop on and say hello and give you a bit of a heads up on the programming plan for the year in case anyone would like to be involved this year. So first off, this year we have partnered with Yves Saint Laurent, or YSL, which is a makeup line through L'Oreal. If any of you have heard of them, they are really amazing. We are working to train folks all around the world, so very exciting. We're expanding a little bit outside of the US through their Abuse Is Not Love campaign on ways to prevent and identify intimate partner violence. So this summer, we're going to launch a new intimate partner violence training module, and from March 1st, Until March 15th, we are going to work with about 30 volunteer students to participate in a pilot program to review the new resources and provide feedback before the public launch of the module, which should be around June of this year. So if anyone would like to participate in this pilot program, please feel free to sign up in the coming weeks. We will be sharing a link soon through our listserv, so all of you should be on there already. And we are also putting together a survey to explore ways that the movement is changing and where we really are in this work, so that we can figure out what our priorities should be at this time, especially now that we have a much more supportive we have a lot more legislative and executive support. So this will also come through the listserv, I would say in about a week or two. So look out for that. Last thing, as Maeve mentioned, we were really thrilled to see so many of you tune in for our Engaging Men series. And if you missed a session, please feel free to check out the links on our YouTube channel. They are all loaded up on there. So feel free to look at them, to share them. They are for anyone and everyone. All of you know that we are at the core of our mission is the belief that culture change requires all of us, including men, speaking out against sexual assault on campus. So that's why we started the Engaging Men series, and we are planning on extending it because it did really well. So in the chat, I am going to paste a quick survey. Oh, okay, thanks, Tracy. So helpful. And so if you could fill out the survey, if you were able to attend, or if you're able to catch some of the sessions on YouTube and you have some feedback, please let us know. We would really like to hear from you about what types of conversations that you would like to see us host. And please be honest, we have a lot of work to do, even with the support of administration. So please feel free to take the survey. And again, if anyone would like to work on any of these projects with me or with the team, please feel free to tell Maeve, and Maeve will connect us. But thank you so much for all of your work. It's going to be a tough year, but I think we are going to do a lot of really great work. So Maeve, I'll pass back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sylvia. So up next, I wanted to talk about something that's a little bit new for It's On Us. We've had our regional advisors for a while now, and we have them for each geographical region. But we also have regional advisors at large who serve to uplift and support specific communities. This year we have 5 at-large regional advisors for different communities. We have one for LGBTQIA students, disabled and neurodiverse students, Black students, the Greek community, and Latinx students. Our at-large RAs will be here for you whenever you need support serving their specific communities. Today, Sammy Jo, our at-large RA for Latinx students, will be doing a short presentation on survivor-friendly language and action on social media. Give me a moment to pull this up. So Sammy Jo is a senior creative writing student at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. She's originally from Brownsville, Texas, and is really passionate about snails and sriracha. She also has a puppy named Oliver Mochi, Ollie for short. I'm going to hand it over to you, Sammy Jo, and I will pull up your presentation just now here. I'm going to stop the share for a moment so I can pull this up. I apologize because I have about 100 tabs pulled up at the moment. Okay. Here we go. And Sammy Jo, have you turn off mute and hand it over to you.
Hello, I'm Sammy Joe, as Maeve said, and today I will be talking a little bit about how to support survivors in this virtual world we're in. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. I always like to start off with trigger warnings when I do these types of presentations, as should you. So before I begin, I'd just like to preface that some topics I will be going over may be potentially triggering to some of you, so please remember to take care of yourself first. If at any point you need to leave the presentation, please feel free to do so. My feelings won't be hurt and no judgment will be passed. Here are the topics I will be going over today: trigger warnings, how and when to use them, survivor-friendly language, content you should and should not be sharing on social media, what to do when someone shares their story with you, and I'll be ending with additional ways to support survivors from home. So starting off with trigger warnings, the most important thing to remember is that you should always be using one if you're going to go over potentially triggering content. I know some people might think that they're like unnecessary or too extra, but they're really not. They're super helpful to those that are more sensitive to certain topics, and it doesn't take too much time away from our daily lives to better accommodate and respect them and their needs. Trigger warnings also need to be accessible. Oop. That can look at different ways. Sometimes you'll need to have different languages available depending on your audience. You should also make sure to have both a warning you can see and one you can hear for our visually and hearing impaired friends. Trigger warnings are super important and cool because they are also a model of consent, which we're all a fan of. Trigger warnings put choice back in the hands of survivors and lets them decide when and how to engage with potentially triggering content. So now moving on to survivor-friendly language. A common mix-up I've noticed is between the words victim and survivor. A lot of people, can you go to the next slide? I'm sorry. A lot of people just don't know which one's the right one to use, and I'm here to tell you that you should definitely always be using the word survivor. The problem with the word victim is that it implies that the person is defined by the harm they endured and that they are in some way damaged. The word victim can make someone seem and feel pretty powerless, and none of these are true, of course. But we look at the word survivor, and we always use that word, because it implies that the individual is not defined by the harm they endured, but instead by the life they lead. The word survivor puts the power back into the individual's hands, which is what we want. Oop. Another common mix-up I've noticed is the difference between the words date rape and rape. To clarify, there's absolutely no difference, and we should stray away from using the term date rape because it seems to imply that the incident was less serious, which is not the case. Just because you go on a date with someone or you're in a relationship with someone does not make the harmful situation any less harmful. In fact, in 8 out of 10 sexual assaults, the survivor actually does know their perpetrator. So there shouldn't be this different way to say it that implies that the incident was somehow less violent. Instead, we should name the crime followed by information about the perpetrator, if that is applicable, because everyone has different levels of privacy they like to uphold, and we have to respect that. So now moving on to victim blaming. Note the victim in quotations because we don't talk like that. That word is wrong, but so is this way of thinking, so it makes sense why it's worded that way. Victim blaming is the attitude which suggests that the survivor, rather than the perpetrator, bears responsibility for the assault. I'm so sorry, my dog wants to be let out. I'm going to quickly do that.
That is totally fine, Sammy Joe. My dog is currently rampaging around in the living room. We also are always supportive of people showing their pets on camera.
I would love to show him, but he's too crazy right now. But next time. Sorry, back into this. Victim blaming is the attitude which suggests that the survivor, rather than the perpetrator, bears responsibility for the assault. Victim blaming occurs when it is assumed that an individual did something to provoke the violence by their actions, words, or the way they dress, among many other things. This way of thinking is so common because many people would rather believe that someone caused their own misfortune because it makes the world seem like a safer place. If they can point out things that led to such horrible events, they can detach themselves from that reality and think things like, well, I don't dress that way, or I don't do those things, so that could never happen to me, which we know to be unfortunately not true. It's a bad way of thinking, but it makes sense why so many people do think this way. But it is so important to call it out when you see it. Many survivors are already grappling with feelings of guilt and shame for what has happened. It is essential that we do not reinforce these feelings with the language we use. No matter what they were wearing, how much they had to drink, or whether they had a previously consensual relationship with the perpetrator, the survivor should not be blamed. It is never the survivor's fault. Something that feeds into victim blaming in Latinx communities is this idea of machismo. Machismo is essentially just toxic masculinity, but a little bit more. Rape culture is a hard pill to swallow for most communities, but it is in fact alive and thriving in places closer to home than we might fully understand. Growing up in a primarily Latinx community, there is a certain level of masculinity that is perpetuated in an unhealthy and in an increasingly common way. This is the mentality that people have that makes them think they can take what they want when they want, regardless of permission. As a disclaimer, because this is obviously a very sensitive and specific topic to discuss, this is not a generalization of all men in Latinx communities. Instead, it is an observation supported in data and does not isolate Latinx communities as the only men with these issues, nor does it say that all Latinx men are of this character substance. According to the Existe Ayuda, a nonprofit research and outreach program for women, especially victims of sexual violence, women of Latinx descent are increasingly more likely to be victimized by sexual violence in their lifetime than white women. And because of this, Latina women are reportedly more likely to leave school and extracurricular activities to avoid being sexually harassed or assaulted. According to the same source, married Latina women are less likely to report the violence they experience at home. Out of 3 surveyed groups of white, Black, and Latina women were more likely to face sexual violence, but were also more likely to receive ostracism from their communities. This takes us back to victim blaming. Women are subject to scrutiny in the face of sexual abuse by naysayers who insist that somehow the women attacked are to blame for what has happened to them. Latinx culture, especially the machismo complex, is partly to blame for survivors of sexual violence having no outlet to discuss what has happened to them safely. Just like victim blaming, we have a responsibility to call it out any and every time we see it happening. And this can mean during class time if professors or even students step out of line, at home with our families, among our friends, and on social media, all super important. While we're on the topic of social media, here are a few things you should be and should not be posting. Let's start with what you should not be posting. For starters, you should avoid sharing trauma porn. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a form of media that showcases someone's pain and trauma in excessive amounts for the sake of entertainment. These posts exploit a traumatic experience solely for the purpose of shock value. These posts can be triggering to see, and the constant, easy access sharing can be taxing on the wellness of survivors. Again, you should always use trigger warnings when sharing potentially triggering content. Remember to never share any sensitive or personal information when it is not your story to tell. And never, ever, ever share traumatic experiences unprovoked. Sometimes we want to make someone feel heard and show them we relate, but that's a lot to put on someone, especially if you didn't ask if it was okay to do so first. Of course, by all means, you should feel free to talk about your experiences among friends, but make sure to always properly assess the situation at hand and make sure they're in the right headspace to receive that information. Now, some things you should be sharing include supportive messages, self-care reminders, and remember when you are posting about more sensitive topics, always frame experiences as events and not identities. Here are a few examples of self-care reminders. Side note, Remember that self-care isn't always bubble baths and chocolate. It's also important to do laundry and eat a vegetable every now and then. But there's also nothing wrong with bubble baths if you really want one / need one. So that was a weird way to say so. But moving on to what to do when someone shares their story with you. That can be in person or through a FaceTime call or a text message. It really just depends. The most important thing to do is to remain calm and actively listen. Try to not interrupt with any questions or comments. Actually, avoid questions at all costs because those little details are not important at the moment, and your friend just needs someone to listen to them. Make sure to not really offer any advice or any resources unless asked to do so. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just be there and listen. We need to always respect boundaries and remember to check in because boundaries are ever changing. And of course, always remain confidentiality. Going back to the first point of remaining calm and still, it can feel weird through a video camera, but the same way you would firmly plant your feet, stop swaying, and maintain eye contact when someone shares their story with you in person, you have to make sure you're letting the other person know you are actively listening through a video call too. Direct eye contact can also look a little different online. It can look like not moving your eyes around too much, staying still, and of course, actively listening, as we've already touched on. Here are a few more ways to support survivors from home. Always remembering to support and care for your loved ones. You can share supportive messages and resources online, whether that be on social media or even in your group chats. Everyone likes a sweet message every once in a while. You can also donate to your local crisis centers. That can be either your time or your money, super helpful. And of course, remember to take care of yourself. I mentioned supporting your loved ones, and you should be your most loved one. You can't pour from an empty cup, so just keep that in mind. That is all I have for you today. I hope it was informative. Thank you for listening to me talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sammy Jo. That was incredible. Some really great reminders. I especially love when we talk about, making sure that we're all aware that self-care looks different for everybody. And it's not always to do with buying things or taking a bath. There are many ways for you to practice self-care. So thank you so much for that really awesome presentation, Sammy Jo. Very excited to have you on the team this year. And any students that are interested in programming for Latinx students or survivors, Sammy Jo is definitely the one to reach out to. You can contact her through me or through your geographical regional advisor or through her contact info as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our incredible executive director, Tracy Vichers, who is going to give us a quick chat before we do a little question and answer.
Thanks so much, Maeve. And thank you so much, Sammy Jo, for your great presentation. We're so lucky to have you as one of our regional advisors this year. Our regional advisor program has been so critical to maintaining our chapter network over the past few years, and just so proud of all of the students who have stepped up this year to serve as RAs. I just wanted to join to say hi to all of you and also to thank all of you. I know that this school year has been difficult on so many accounts, whether you're attending completely virtually, if you have a hybrid model, if you have gone back to school in person. I know that school has looked very different for everyone this year, and everybody has done such a great job being able to keep the programming going, tuning in, and continuing to have these really important conversations about campus sexual assault prevention and survivor support. So just from the bottom of my heart, I'm grateful for the continued support and engagement all of you, our student leaders, have continued to show to It's On Us this year. As Maeve said, we have a ton of virtual programming coming up this spring, and I hope you all will continue to tune into it and continue to stay engaged. It's been really inspirational for me to see almost 6,000 students participate virtually in our series this past summer. And we had almost 2,000 people tune in for our sessions for our January Engaging Men series. So just to see those numbers so high and to see so much engagement from folks, even in this virtual world that we are living in, I just want to say thank you to all of you for doing that. I also want to acknowledge, as Maeve did, that the last 4 years were also really hard, but I have so much hope for the future. Just the commitment that all of our student leaders have shown and the resilience that all of you have shown over the last 4 years under the Trump administration to continue to support survivors, to continue to speak out for your rights as students, to continue to engage in this prevention education work has been incredibly inspiring. And, as somebody who is, I always call myself old. I get yelled at for doing that. But as somebody who graduated college in 2010, before the 2011 Dear Colleague letter, before It's On Us was even started, I can tell you that from the last 15 years of my life organizing to stop college sexual assault, we sometimes face these setbacks. We do. It's part of culture change. It's part of legislative change, and it's hard, and it can be really frustrating at times. But I can also say that the pendulum swings back in the right direction. And over the next 4 years with a supportive Biden-Harris administration, we have the opportunity to do some really critical work to not only build on everything that all of you have done and fought for to maintain over the last 4 years, but also create a better and brighter pathway for survivors and to also make our campus communities safer. When It's On Us was launched in 2014, one of the primary goals was to raise awareness about this issue so that way there would be a day where no student graduates from college having experienced campus sexual violence. And I truly believe that over the next 4 years, with the support of the Biden administration, we will become so much closer to achieving that goal. And that will be because of the hard work of all of you that we're going to accomplish over the next few years. So even though we're in this virtual environment and we can't see each other, I just want to thank all of you right now, as personally as I can in this situation, for all of your hard work, and just to say, continue persevering, continue to keep up the fight. It's On Us is here for you. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We want to support you. We're here to support you. And together we will create a brighter future for all students on campus moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was awesome. You're always very inspiring, and it's great to hear from you. So I didn't see, okay, the chat is disabled. Here we go. Everyone publicly and directly. Okay, this should be back open. The chat should be back open. So if you have any questions, please drop them in there or direct message them to me. Before then, we'll just have there's my dog on cue. All right. Before then, I'll just address something just in case anyone had this question. In case you haven't been contacted by your regional advisor geographically, or if they haven't reached out yet, I will drop my email into the chat right now, and feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will get you in touch with your regional advisor. They could also be going to your spam folder, so keep an eye on that, as many are still reaching out. Also, I want to remind you, if you have not, to register as an official chapter so you can get our programming and your regional advisor knows how to contact you. I will send the link, which I cannot find at the exact moment right now, but I will send it in a follow-up to all of you wonderful folks on how to register as an official chapter. We also would love to have you register your events throughout the year. I know they're virtual, but we want to be able to support you and push them through social media. So I'm linking to a Google form here, which is where we ask that you do your event registration. Okay. Okay, so I just got a question from an advisor. She said she's the advisor for her campus's It's On Us group, new to that role. Should I have the leaders contact you regarding the regional advisor and making sure they are registered? Absolutely. My email that I put in the chat, you can email me directly with CCing the leaders, or you can have them reach out to me, and I will get them in touch with all those that, all the necessary people that they need. That's a great question. Yes, anyone who is not a student, but just an advisor or a staff member, feel free to connect me with those students so we can make sure that they're getting everything they need from us this year. And again, if you have any questions that come up later, my email is always open, and I am happy to answer any questions, jump on any one-on-one calls. I want to be as available to all of you as I can. Ideally, in an ideal world, I would be visiting campuses, but since there are no campuses open at the moment, this is where we'll be. So please reach out to me with any and all questions. And, oh, go ahead, Sammy Jo.
I had a question about what I said about not like outright sharing resources. I'm just going to read the question if that is okay. So it reads, curious about your perspective on why sharing resources isn't appropriate unless asked for. I work at a crisis center and I know something we struggle with is survivors knowing about our services. Do you think it's okay to continue to ask our allies to recommend our services so the survivor is at least aware we exist? Definitely sharing resources is super important. When I said that, it was more so as someone is sharing their story, like you shouldn't be interrupting them to be like, oh, well, I know this place that can help, or you can go here, and just fully hearing them out. But I do definitely encourage sharing resources after the fact.
I'll add to that I completely agree. I think something that Sammy Jo, from what I can see, was trying to share and that I think is really important is when the initial disclosure is happening, especially that moment, those first moments when you're having those discussions, it's the best thing you can do is just listen. That isn't going to be the only conversation you have with that person, most likely. So remember that there always will be time to share resources if they're interested in them. That being said, also for the person who asked, who works for the local crisis center, if people are disclosing to you and they're aware that you are an advocate for this crisis center, they'll probably be interested in those resources you can provide for them. So it's definitely a case-by-case basis, but I fully agree with Sammy Jo about just being there and listening, because that is the number one thing you can do. Yes, I love that. Lauren posted in the chat, I love the idea of making sure whoever you are talking to feels heard and not dismissed when recommended resources. Sometimes that person just wants to confide in a loved one. It doesn't want to feel like a cause. That is an awesome way of putting it. Absolutely. Yeah, big snaps to that. I like that a lot. Let's see. Just want to read this last one. Okay. Yeah, so that is all I've got for you today. I do just want to say that I want to say thank you so much for all of you for tuning in. I also want to thank Sammy Jo for such a great and informative presentation, for Sylvia for hopping on and talking about our programming, and for Tracy for talking about, as always, just being an inspiring person in our lives. It's on Us has given me a lot over the past years of working with them, and I'm so excited to be in this role and be here for all of you students and advisors and everyone fighting this movement. I am so ready to hit the ground running this year, even virtually, and crossing my fingers that next year I'll be able to see all of your wonderful faces in person. We're really lucky to have you all in the movement, and I want to draw attention to the fact that these conversations will be what lead to the real change that we need. Please feel free to write down or take a picture of the resources I'm about to post in the chat box. And remember that you're never alone. We stand for you and are here for you at all times.